Okay, so we're diving into warrior spirit, but
Hold on, no battle axes this time.
yeah, right.
It's more like
We're like,
we've got philosophy, religion, we've even got real-life superheroes.
and they're all asking,
all trying to figure out, like, what does it mean?
what does it mean to be a warrior?
But without the,
Without the fighting.
yeah, the warfare.
Yeah.
So it's a real
Paradox, right?
yeah. How do you channel
How do you have that commitment,
that inner strength? But
but for peace?
yeah,
Totally.
it's tricky.
It is. It is. And we're starting strong
Oh yeah,
with Martin Luther King Jr.
MLK.
Yeah, his philosophy of nonviolence.
Yeah, his writings are so powerful.
They're very clear about this idea.
They're your methods.
Your method's got to be as pure
Because your goals.
as your goals. You can't compromise.
No compromises. It's like he actually calls the means and the ends convertible terms.
Convertible
You can't have one without the other. It's like, if you were going to bake a cake,
Oh,
you can't use rotten eggs and expect it to come out delicious.
right.
Same goes for like a just society,
A just and peaceful society. So
Yeah.
no cutting corners, no.
No sneaky tactics.
Yeah, just because you think the ends are good.
Right, yeah. It's like, it's total opposite of that. The ends justify the means.
Which some people believe.
Which a lot of people, unfortunately, still believe.
But he really believed that if you,
do something immoral,
even for a good cause,
even for a good cause, it's going to mess up the outcome.
corrupt the outcome.
Yeah.
Interesting. And it's not even just about
Outward actions.
outward actions. He really talks about
Internal versus external
nature.
dimension of nonviolence.
Yeah, so externally it's like
No physical harm.
no physical harm.
But internally, it's more about how do you
maintain your integrity
keep your principles even when
when things get tough,
yeah, exactly.
which is really hard.
It is.
It is. It is. And it made me think of
Uh,
this Reddit debate I saw about pacifism.
oh, interesting.
This whole question of like,
Does it actually work?
does it actually work against violence?
Right.
Some people were like, no, you got to defend yourself.
Self-defense.
But then other people were sharing these amazing stories of how they were in dangerous situations.
And they
Yeah,
de-escalated.
De-escalated without violence.
Without violence. And it was
It was really powerful.
powerful, yeah. What struck me was that,
It wasn't passive,
yeah, it wasn't just like,
reeling over.
it was very
It was active.
active, strategic,
Yeah, they were using,
communication skill.
they were creating physical distance.
Using their warrior spirit in a way.
It's like they were using their warrior spirit, but the weapons were different.
Different tools, for sure.
Different tools. It was
Oh.
communication and strategic thinking.
Yeah, yeah. That's a great way to put it.
Instead of fists.
And weapons.
Exactly. Exactly.
Now, speaking of
Real world.
real world stuff.
We got real life superheroes.
Oh, yeah, those guys.
The people who
Patrol the streets,
doing outreach.
trying to make a difference.
They're out there. And what I found fascinating was
What'd you find?
even they struggle with organization.
Oh, really? Oh, I'm surprised.
I know. You think people with shared goals?
You'd think it'd be easy to work together.
Right.
So what's the issue?
Well, this forum was saying it's a few things.
Okay.
One is just the diversity of the community,
Like different backgrounds.
different backgrounds,
Different approaches.
different countries even.
Yeah. So finding a unified strategy.
It's hard.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole secrecy thing.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So building trust and transparency when you're
In the shadow.
in the shadows, it's hard.
Makes sense.
And then someone pointed out a lot of these superheroes,
What kind of personalities?
they're kind of type A,
Oh, right. Strong-willed.
strong-willed,
A
driven,
little too independent.
a little too independent. So getting them to agree on a leader or
Not shared vision.
a shared vision, it's tough.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Moving on.
moving from the real-life heroes
Yeah.
to ancient wisdom,
Love it.
we stumbled on this Lakota prophecy
Okay.
about rainbow warriors.
Rainbow warriors.
This idea that people will unite
Across their differences.
across their differences to heal the earth.
It's a beautiful idea.
It is. And what's powerful,
Is powerful.
how it echoes in other traditions,
Oh, yeah.
like the second coming of Christ in Christianity.
Or like the golden age in Greek mythology.
It's like there's this universal longing
This deep desire.
for a world where people come together
With love and compassion.
to create something better,
Yeah, a better future.
a better future. And it's not even just a far-off dream.
No.
This article points out that we're already seeing
Aspects of it.
aspects of this prophecy
In the world today.
in modern activism.
Oh, interesting. Like who?
So think of someone like Shailene Woodley
Okay, yeah.
and how she talks about
How we're all indigenous to the land.
it's a beautiful way of emphasizing
Our connection.
our interconnectedness,
Yeah.
our responsibility
For
for
protecting the planet.
protecting the planet,
Yeah, taking care of each other.
taking care of each other. And it makes me think of something
Okay, what's that?
that we found in a talk by a Zen priest.
Okay.
It's about resurrecting the warrior spirit
But peacefully.
peacefully, and it's really inspired by the Buddha.
Oh, cool. What do they say?
So they talk about how the warrior spirit,
Mm-hmm.
it's about living a life
Of purpose.
of purpose, not just for yourself,
But for everyone.
for the benefit of all beings.
Like a bodhisattva.
Yeah, an awakening warrior.
Dedicated to helping others.
And they actually quote the Buddha saying,
Oh, quote. I love it.
if you do not take care of one another, who else will do so?
Wow, that's powerful.
It's a call to action.
It is.
And to illustrate this
Can I
point,
give an example?
they share this amazing story of Lama Goboe,
Lamagobi.
who won the Nobel Peace Prize
Wow.
for leading this nonviolent women's movement in Liberia.
In Liberia.
And she mobilized thousands of women
Thousands.
to demand an end to this brutal civil war
All through peaceful means.
through peaceful protests, prayer,
Wow, incredible.
determination, sheer determination.
That's amazing.
It's so inspiring to see
How powerful.
how powerful nonviolent action can be,
Even in those circumstances.
even in the face of such horrific circumstances.
Yeah, they really show.
Anyone can be a warrior for peace,
You don't have to be a certain type of person.
regardless of your background or your beliefs.
Yeah, that's really cool. Now, let's switch gears a little bit
'Kay.
and look at two different religious traditions
Okay.
and how they approach this idea of being a warrior.
I'm in.
So we've got Sikhism and Jainism.
Oh, interesting.
So from what I understand,
Yeah.
Sikhs have a really long history of
Warriorhood,
warriorhood.
defending the oppressed, fighting for justice.
Right, but it's important to note that their whole concept of just war
Just war.
is really rooted in
Self-defense.
self-defense
That's
and
what proportionality.
proportionality. Yeah.
Like you don't just,
Use force for the sake of it.
Yeah.
It's a last resort.
a last resort when.
All other options have been exhausted.
So it's not about violence for the sake of violence. It's about
Protecting the vulnerable.
protecting the vulnerable,
That's what I'm-
upholding righteousness.
Exactly. Exactly. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have
The Jains.
the Jains, yeah.
And they're all about
Absolute nonviolence.
absolute nonviolence,
No matter what.
no matter what.
Their principle of ahimsa
Yes.
is really about having this profound respect
For all living beings.
all living beings, and that includes
Not doing anything
that could cause harm.
that could cause harm.
So it's a pretty
It's a very strict
yeah,
approach.
yeah, for sure.
So how do you reconcile those two?
Right, that's the question.
Can you be a warrior for justice?
And still adhere to this principle of ahimsa.
Yeah.
Well, the source suggests
Yeah.
that both traditions are ultimately about
They're both about
equality, compassion,
selfless service.
yeah, selfless service.
So it's not about
One being right or
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah.
It's more about how you live
how you live those values.
in a complex world.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Now, this next source really made me think about
Okay.
how we understand God and violence.
Interesting.
This Christian pastor
Okay.
was arguing that even the Old Testament,
Which often gets seen as pretty violent.
which often gets seen as pretty violent,
Yeah.
actually points toward,
God's nonviolent nature.
when you see it through the lens of
Yeah. Christ's sacrifice.
right sacrifice.
Bold claim.
It is a bold claim.
Yeah.
He uses the example of the Passover story,
Oh, okay.
where the Bible says the Lord will strike down every firstborn,
Right.
but then it later clarifies that it's a destroyer who
Interesting.
carries out the act.
Okay.
And he interprets this as God allowing
Allowing the destroyer to act.
allowing the destroyer, which in his view is Satan,
Okay. Oh.
but ultimately restraining him.
Yeah. So God's not actually doing the violence.
Not doing the violence, he's restraining it
Interesting.
from causing even more harm
So it's like God's working within.
within the situation.
Yeah.
And he uses other examples too,
Like what?
like the rebellion of Korah, the parting of the Red Sea,
Right.
to argue that God often works,
By allowing things to happen.
allowing things to unfold,
Rather than
directly
inflicting violence. So it's about seeing God's true character,
which is
love and nonviolence,
even in the midst of,
seemingly violent events
and he emphasizes that by understanding the Old Testament
through the lens of.
through the lens of Christ's sacrifice.
Yeah.
we can see how God ultimately chooses
Absorb violence.
rather than inflict it.
That's really powerful.
It's a real challenge
It is.
to how we understand
The Old Testament?
the Old Testament, God's role in history.
Yeah.
Okay, time for
What's next?
a Tibetan legend.
Oh, I love it.
Ever heard of Shambhala warriors?
Of course. They're like legendary figures with immense
Courage.
courage and compassion.
And they're on a mission.
A mission to dismantle the mind-made weapons that
threaten the world.
Right.
Mind-made weapons.
sounds intense.
What does that even mean?
Well, it's like a metaphor
A metaphor
for
for
negative emotions.
the destructive thoughts.
The destructive thoughts like
Anger, greed,
hatred, ignorance.
ignorance, yeah. All that stuff that resides within us.
The legend's saying these inner forces
They're the real root
of suffering and conflict.
in the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Shambhala warriors are battling
Battling the darkness with
them themselves.
Exactly, exactly.
They use compassion and insight as their weapons
Oh, that's
to
good.
combat those inner demons.
So both are necessary. Both are necessary. So the compassion's like
the fuel for action.
the fuel.
And then insight.
Insight helps you see
Interconnectedness.
the interconnectedness of everything.
Yeah, and it helps you avoid
That's dualistic thinking.
like us versus them.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're really saying
What are they saying?
the real battle for peace,
It starts within.
it starts within each of us.
We have to conquer our own inner demons.
Before we can create a peaceful world.
Exactly.
Now let's get practical.
Let's do it.
Our research uncovered all these specific roles
Okay.
that nonviolent warriors can play
In the world today.
in the world today.
Like what?
Everything from community watch
Okay.
to social activism
Yeah.
to just being a good listener,
Supporting people.
offering emotional support.
So many ways.
So many ways
To be a peaceful warrior.
to channel that
That warrior spirit.
peacefully.
Yeah.
I was surprised to learn, though,
What's that?
that most real-life superheroes, they actually...
They work in teams or networks.
It makes sense, though.
It does. It does because
You can have a bigger impact
you could have a much bigger impact
if you're working together.
if you're pooling your skills and resources.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
They even specialize in different areas.
Oh, interesting.
Like some of them focus on crime prevention.
Okay.
So, community patrols,
Yeah.
de-escalation tactics.
Oh, cool.
Some even do digital detective work
Digital detectives. That's pretty cool.
to uncover online crime.
What else? What are the roles?
Well, a lot of them have
First aid training?
first aid training, yeah.
CPR, EMT, that kind of thing.
So they can respond to emergencies,
Respond to emergencies,
immediate
provide
assistance.
immediate assistance,
And there's a huge emphasis on
community building,
community building.
and support.
Support, yeah.
So, like, fundraising for those in need,
Okay.
private investigation to uncover injustice,
Wow.
even counseling
Counseling.
and
yeah.
emotional support.
Wow, so they really run the gamut.
It's not just about stopping the bad guys.
It's about creating a safer,
It's about creating a safer, more supportive,
yeah,
and
more just society.
more just society for everyone.
Exactly.
And we can't forget about
The social activism.
the social activism.
All right.
A lot of them are using their platform
It's unique platform.
to raise awareness about
Important issues.
environmental protection, homelessness,
Human rights.
human rights. They're using their powers
Superpowers.
to fight for
systemic change.
systemic change.
And advocate for a more compassionate world.
It's pretty inspiring to see
It is.
how people are taking that warrior spirit,
And channeling it
channeling it into
so many different forms
of positive action.
of positive action. Yeah.
It really shows there's a place for everyone in
Everyone.
this movement.
Regardless of their
Skills.
interests.
Yeah.
It's not about fitting into a mold.
It's not about fitting into a mold.
It's about finding your own way to contribute.
To a better future.
Absolutely.
And that brings us to our final source for this part.
Oh, okay.
It's all about finding your own path.
I like it.
The Way of the Peaceful Warrior,
Based on that book.
based on the book by Dan Millman.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
I love that book.
It's about
It's about this young gymnast
who meets this wise old
who
man,
meets this wise old man who totally
changes his perspective.
changes his perspective on life.
Yeah.
It's essentially a guide to
Living
living a more mindful and
purposeful life.
purposeful life. But
We'll have to dive into the specifics.
we'll dive into that in the next part
of our deep dive.
of our deep dive.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned.
So we were talking about the way of the peaceful warrior.
Yeah, yeah.
What guidance does it offer on cultivating that inner strength? And
I'm ready. Bring on the wisdom.
all right, well, the book really emphasizes Mindfulness.
Mindfulness.
Becoming aware of your thoughts and emotions and reactions.
So you can make conscious choices.
Yeah, so you're not just on autopilot.
Oh, so it's like that classic advice, take a deep breath before you react.
Yeah, exactly. But it's easier said than done.
Way easier said than done.
When you're in the heat of the moment.
Especially then.
But the point is, we do have a choice.
Oh, interesting.
Between every stimulus and response.
There's a gap.
There's a little gap.
We could choose.
And the book helps you widen that gap.
Oh, that's cool.
So you can act with intention.
Not just impulse.
Not just reacting.
Okay, so mindfulness is
It's
about
creating that space.
creating that space. Any practical tips?
Oh yeah, the book suggests things like
Like what?
meditation,
Okay.
deep breathing exercises,
Yeah.
even just taking a few moments.
To just observe.
Yeah, observe your thoughts and feelings without judging them.
It's like cultivating that inner stillness.
That quiet space.
Yeah, even when everything around you is
Chaotic.
crazy.
It's also about recognizing that you're not your thoughts or your emotions.
Oh, interesting.
You're the observer, the awareness that's experiencing them.
Whoa.
And that shift in perspective can be really empowering.
It reminds me of those
Shambhala warriors.
dismantling the mind-made weapons.
Yeah, it's like they're doing the same thing.
They're facing those inner demons.
Exactly. Recognizing that our minds can be our greatest battleground.
Yeah.
And mindfulness is the key to disarming those weapons.
Creating a more peaceful...
internal landscape.
So mindfulness is step one.
All right, step one. What else?
What else does the way of the peaceful warrior?
It also talks about finding your purpose.
Purpose?
That unique contribution
So you're meant to make.
that you're meant to make to the world.
Oh, like finding your calling.
Yeah, that thing that lights you up.
Makes you feel like you're making a difference.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be some
Grandiose.
grand world-changing thing.
Yeah.
It could be being a loving parent,
Supportive friend.
a dedicated artist.
Anything that brings you that meaning and fulfillment.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's about bringing that intention.
To everything you do.
Whether it's
Writing a symphony.
washing the dishes.
Exactly. Living a life of purpose no matter what.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Now, along with mindfulness and purpose,
The book also highlights the importance of
gratitude
gratitude.
and acceptance.
Yes. Those two are big ones.
Because, you know, they say comparison is the thief of joy.
So true.
If you're always focused on
what you lack,
what you lack, what other people have,
comparing yourself.
you're never really happy.
Yeah, you're never satisfied.
So gratitude's about shifting your focus.
To what you do have.
Yeah.
Appreciating the good.
Instead of what's missing.
What's missing? So how do we become more grateful?
Is it just telling ourselves to be thankful?
Yeah. Does that work?
Well, it's more about
It's more about
making a conscious effort to notice.
to notice and appreciate.
Yeah. The good things.
Big and small.
Big and small.
Or
Exactly.
a warm cup of coffee.
A sunny day.
A kind word. Training yourself to focus on those moments.
To really focus on them.
Yeah, it's like rewiring your brain.
Rewiring your brain to look for the positive.
Instead of getting bogged down by the negative.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
Now, what about acceptance?
Acceptance.
How does that fit in?
Acceptance is about acknowledging the reality of your situation.
Even when it's tough.
Even when it's painful.
Letting go of resistance.
Letting go of resistance, allowing things to be as they are.
Without judgment.
Without judgment, yeah. It sounds hard.
Incredibly difficult.
Especially when you're facing.
Stuff you just don't want to accept.
Yeah, things you wish were different.
But it doesn't mean you're giving up, right?
Right. Doesn't mean you're pretending everything's okay.
When it's not.
It's about acknowledging what is.
And choosing to respond.
In a way that aligns with your values.
Yeah, so it's like finding the strength to face
Difficult situations.
with grace and courage.
Even when you can't
Control the outcome.
control the outcome, yeah.
So it's almost like surrendering to what is.
But not in a passive way.
Not in a passive way. You're still...
And engaged.
Yeah.
You're present.
It's just that you're recognizing that life has its
Ups and downs.
ups and downs, and you're learning how to navigate those
Be
challenges.
resilience.
Resilience and compassion
For yourself.
for yourself and others.
And that makes me think of
Detachment.
detachment, which is closely tied to acceptance.
So detachment, is that about letting go of
Emotional attachments.
emotional attachments to people?
It's more about letting go of attachment to outcomes.
Oh,
You're still engaged, you still care.
But you're not letting your happiness
Depend on things.
depend on things turning out a certain way.
Yeah, you're not clinging.
To specific results.
Or getting caught up in
expectations.
expectations, right? Because when you're attached to outcomes,
What happened?
you're constantly striving. You're always feeling like
It needs something.
you need something more to be happy.
But detachment is about
finding that inner peace and contentment. That's not dependent on
external circumstances.
Yeah, it's like realizing
You already have everything you need
should be happy
right now.
right now.
That's pretty radical.
It is a shift in perspective.
So how do you do that?
How do you let go?
How do you let go of those attachments, especially when they're...
So strong.
Yeah.
Well, the book suggests things like
Like what?
meditation, mindfulness,
Becoming more aware?
becoming more aware of your attachments
Yeah.
and how they're affecting you.
And it's also about recognizing
What?
that those attachments often come from
Fear?
a sense of lack.
Yeah, a sense of lack.
When you address those underlying
The
beliefs.
attachment naturally loosens its grip
So it's about shifting your focus
from what you might lose
to what you already have.
to what truly matters.
Okay, that's a pretty radical shift.
It is. It's a big one.
Okay, so we've talked about
Mindfulness.
purpose,
Yeah.
acceptance, detachment,
Ones.
pretty deep stuff.
It is deep.
What else is the way of the peaceful warrior?
It also emphasizes
Right.
the importance of forgiveness,
Oh, forgiveness.
both of yourself and others.
Forgiveness
Yeah.
is something I really struggle with.
It's hard,
It's so hard to let go of that anger and resentment.
especially when someone's really hurt you.
Yeah.
But the book makes this great point
Okay.
that holding on to those feelings,
Yeah.
it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Oh, wow.
It only harms you
Yeah.
in the end.
So forgiveness is really about releasing.
Those negative emotions.
So you can heal and move forward.
Even if the other person
Isn't sorry.
isn't sorry, it hasn't changed,
Yeah, it's not about
condoning their actions.
pretending it was okay.
It's about choosing to let go.
So you can find peace.
Exactly.
And that ties back into the...
Peaceful warrior.
You're disarming those weapons.
The internal weapons.
Yeah.
Of anger and resentment.
It's about creating that more peaceful internal...
Landscape.
So you can act from a place of...
Love and compassion.
rather than anger and bitterness.
Exactly. Now, along similar lines,
Okay.
the book also talks about non-judgment.
Non-judgment.
That sounds tough, right?
Nearly impossible.
In today's world,
It feels like everyone's judging everyone.
it does. But it takes practice.
Okay.
It's essential for cultivating inner peace.
Because when you judge,
Or others.
you create separation.
Separation, disharmony.
You feed those voices in your head that say
I'm not gonna.
they're not worthy.
Exactly.
But isn't it important to...
For right from wrong?
Yeah, to hold people accountable.
Absolutely. Non-judgment isn't about
Condoning bad behavior.
or ignoring injustice.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that everyone is
On their own journey.
on their own journey, making mistakes.
Trying to figure things out.
It's about choosing to see the good,
Even when they're struggling.
having compassion,
Remembering that we're all
flawed human beings
doing the best we can.
with what we've got.
Yeah.
And finally, the book really emphasizes
Courage.
courage. Yeah, true courage isn't the absence of fear,
It's the willingness to act.
despite fear.
Despite fear.
It's like those Shambhala warriors again.
Yeah, they're not fearless.
They're choosing to act.
Even though they're afraid.
The peaceful warrior understands.
That fear is
They don't let it.
paralyzed.
They face it
They face it head on.
and act according to their values.
Even when it's scary.
So it's about finding that inner strength
To stand up.
to stand up for what's right,
Even when it's tough.
even when it's dangerous.
So how do you put all this into practice?
That's what I'm wondering.
It's a lot.
Mindfulness, purpose, gratitude, acceptance, detachment,
Forgiveness.
non-judgment, courage.
It's a lot to juggle.
It is.
But the book's not about
Mastering it all.
mastering it all overnight
It's about integrating it.
into your life.
One step at a time.
One step at a time.
So it's more about the journey
Than the destination.
on the destination.
So start by setting an intention to
Yeah.
be more mindful,
And more purposeful.
more grateful, more accepting.
And then find practices that support that.
Exactly.
Maybe it's meditation,
Right.
spending time in nature
Just being more present.
with others,
Yeah. It's about finding what works for you.
and making it a part of your,
Daily routine.
even if it's just for
A few minutes
each day,
each day. Yeah. Small changes add up
over time.
over time. And remember,
Well,
be patient with yourself.
oh, right.
You're going to mess up.
You're going to get triggered.
You're going to fall back into old patterns.
It's okay.
It's okay. It's part of the process.
Just pick yourself back up.
They keep going.
The path of the peaceful warrior,
It's a lifelong journey.
of growth.
Yeah.
And it's like learning to ride a bike.
Oh, yeah. You're going to fall down a few times.
But eventually you find your
Balance.
no.
Shifting gears a bit.
Okay.
We have a source that explores
nonviolent resistance.
from a Christian perspective.
Interesting.
And it acknowledges the tension.
Between the Old Testament,
The Old Testament, which often portrays God as a warrior,
engaging in violence,
and the New Testament,
what Jesus is teaching,
of love and nonviolence.
Right, so how do they reconcile those
The seemingly conflicting
perspectives?
Yeah.
Well, it suggests that we need to understand the Old Testament,
through the lens of
the New Testament,
particularly through
Christ's sacrifice,
So it's about seeing God's true nature
revealed in Jesus,
who chose to
absorb violence.
rather than inflict it.
Exactly.
So the violence in the Old Testament is like
Part of a larger story.
that culminates in the revelation of
God's love and nonviolence.
it's also about recognizing that the violence in the Old Testament
Often reflects the violence
of the ancient world,
of the ancient world, yeah. It's not about,
condoning that violence,
but about understanding
in historical context.
and seeing how God was working within those limitations.
Okay, so how does the source connect that understanding?
To the idea of nonviolent resistance.
Yeah.
It suggests that by following Jesus' example,
Of love and nonviolence?
we can become agents of
Peace and reconciliation.
peace and reconciliation, yeah.
It encourages us to resist
Injustice.
injustice and oppression
But to do
in a way that reflects
such love
it's about fighting for justice.
without becoming like
The oppressor.
the oppressor, yeah, breaking the cycle.
Instead of perpetuating it.
Exactly, embodying the spirit of Christ's teachings,
And striving to create a world
where love triumphs.
over hate.
Over hate, yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about what nonviolent resistance is.
What it looks like
What does it actually look like?
in practice.
What are some real-world examples?
Well, the source points to movements like
Um,
the Civil Rights Movement,
Led by Martin Luther King Jr.,
who drew heavily on
the teachings of Jesus,
to challenge.
racial segregation and discrimination,
It also mentions organizations like Pax Christi,
which promotes peace and nonviolence through
chasing
advocacy.
and direct action
So it's about taking those concrete steps,
to challenge injustice.
whether it's through
peaceful protests,
advocating for policy changes.
educating others,
And it's important to remember that
nonviolent
it's
resistance,
not,
passive,
it takes a lot of
witness to, for the sake
justice.
Oh yeah,
It's about taking a stand,
for what's right.
even when it's
For
dangerous,
this trusting that love will
prevail.
prevail. Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up this part,
Okay.
I want to talk about the power
A
of
story. Stories are so powerful.
They can connect us, move us,
Challenge our assumptions.
motivate us to act,
They can help us make sense of the world.
and our place in it.
Yeah, fostering empathy and understanding.
They can help us see the world,
Through new eyes.
imagine possibilities.
That we might never have considered.
Like the story of Lema Gowe,
Oh, yeah.
the Liberian peace activist.
A perfect example.
It's a testament to the power of
Nonviolent action.
and the transformative potential
Yeah.
of
Women's leadership.
it's a story that deserves to be shared
It does.
widely.
Yeah. It shows how
One person's courage
and determination
can spark a movement.
and create lasting change.
And the source also talked about
also stories
the narratives we tell ourselves.
about who we are.
What's possible.
Yeah, our stories shape our beliefs and actions.
So if we tell ourselves stories of
Limitation,
we're likely to stay stuck.
but if we tell ourselves stories of
Courage,
possibility,
we open ourselves up to.
a world of potential,
So it's about recognizing,
those limiting beliefs,
rewriting our stories
to empower ourselves
to live more authentically.
and make a positive impact.
And sometimes it's about
Listening to other people's stories,
learning from
letting
them.
their narratives expand our understanding.
So before we move on to the final part,
Okay.
I want to invite you to think about
The stories that have shaped you,
what stories have
inspired you,
challenged you.
given you hope.
What stories do you want?
Carry forward.
And what new stories?
Do you want to create
The stories that will shape.
the future you long to see?
All right, so we've covered a ton in this deep dive,
It's been a lot.
from philosophy and religion,
Real life superheroes,
ancient Tibetan legends. We've explored all these different angles
all those different ways of looking at it.
on what it means to be a
Nonviolent warrior.
nonviolent warrior.
So now,
The fun part.
now comes the fun part, connecting all the dots,
Yeah.
seeing what emerges. It's like we've gathered all these threads,
Yeah.
and now we're going to weave them together.
To create this tapestry.
A tapestry of
I
understanding.
love that analogy.
So what stands out to you?
What are the common themes?
It keeps popping up.
What keeps popping up through all these different perspectives?
Well, one that's impossible to miss
Yeah.
is this emphasis on inner transformation.
Inner transformation.
Almost every source we've looked at talks about
The importance of cultivating
inner peace, compassion, wisdom
as the foundation.
for taking action.
It's like that saying, be the change you want to see in the world.
You can't create a more peaceful world
If you haven't cultivated peace.
within yourself.
Exactly.
So whether it's MLK's call for
Internal nonviolence,
the Buddhist concept of the bodhisattva,
Champala warriors,
dismantling those mind-made weapons,
the message is clear.
warriorhood starts within.
It starts within.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that the real battle
Is not against some external enemy,
but against
to greed, hatred,
motives
ignorance,
that reside within.
our minds.
And another key theme has been
Interconnectedness.
interconnectedness.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. From the Lakota Rainbow Warriors
To the Jain principle of ahimsa,
this recognition that we're all part
of a larger web of life,
our actions have ripple effects,
impacting not just ourselves,
but everyone and everything.
around us.
The peaceful warrior gets that.
They understand that interconnectedness.
And their actions reflect that.
They choose compassion,
Cooperation. We're all on the same team.
working towards the same
A
goal.
more peaceful, just, and loving.
World.
And speaking of working towards something,
Another theme is courage.
courage, absolutely.
Every single source
Every single one.
highlights the need for courage.
To stand up,
To speak out,
to act according to your values.
even when it's
Difficult or dangerous.
the peaceful warrior knows that fear,
It's natural,
but they don't let it.
paralyzing,
They choose to act.
in spite of it.
And sometimes the most courageous act
Is choosing love
over fear.
over fear.
And speaking of love,
That's another thread.
that runs through all this.
It's the driving force.
behind nonviolent action.
It's what motivates us to fight for justice.
Stand up for the oppressed.
Work towards a more compassionate world.
Think about MLK's belief in the redemptive power of love,
Or the Christian pastor's interpretation.
of God's nonviolent nature,
Love is presented
the ultimate weapon.
against hatred and violence.
But it's not.
It's not a passive love.
No.
It's an
a
active,
fierce love.
fierce love that moves us
To take action.
to challenge the status quo.
Yeah.
To fight.
For what we believe in.
Is unwavering.
Transformative.
And finally,
One last thread.
the importance of action.
The peaceful warrior is not just a
dreamer. They're actively engaged.
in creating the world.
They want to see.
Yeah.
We've seen so many examples
So many.
from those real-life superhero
Trolling their communities.
activists, organizing protests,
They're everyday people.
offering kindness and support.
It's all about
Bring those principles.
principles.
Thoughts and prayers.
Aren't enough.
We have to do something
We have to take steps.
to bring about change.
It's about walking the talk.
Aligning our actions with our values.
Yeah.
We've explored a lot of ideas today,
A lot.
but ultimately, the path,
Of the nonviolent warrior.
it's a personal one.
It's about finding your own way.
To embody these principles,
Bringing your
skills and passions,
to the table.
making your own contribution.
To a more peaceful and just world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
I want to leave you with a few questions.
To reflect on.
What will your contribution be?
Yeah. What unique
Gifts and talents.
do you bring to the world
How can you use them?
to make a difference
What story do you want to tell?
with your life?
The world is waiting for your unique
Warrior spirit.
to emerge,
Remember, you don't need a cape or a title.
to be a warrior for peace,
It's about having the courage to live your values
to speak up against injustice
and to act with love and compassion.
in all that you do.
Go forth and be the change.
You want to